Thank you for coming all this way. This is the penultimate one. There's one more next Wednesday, which will be a slightly different format next week because you'll be doing it. But yeah, this is our penultimate one. The last 2 weeks have been a really big 2 weeks, and we've got loads of stuff done. So everyone will run you through that. But next slide. Yes, that's the team. Addition of Richard Pope, who has been helping with strategy for taking this from a tool, a product, to a platform, and potentially scaling it. Just to recap, our mission statement: how might we get clear, accurate, live data on affordable housing in order to track properties through their entire lifespan to increase the provision of homes for Southwark residents. And I'll hand over to Alex.
Thanks, Jack. Hi, everyone. I'm Alex. Quick recap on our goals for this sprint. So we had 3 main goals that we wanted to achieve. We wanted to explore multi-phase development and off-site provisioning. We wanted to connect multiple legal agreements or planning applications to a single development, and we wanted to develop search within the tool. So format of this show and tell, we're going to run through all of the things that we've achieved. It's been a really, really busy 2 weeks. We've achieved kind of 8 big wins, and we're going to take you through those. We've also deployed 10 real features into the live tool, and we'll demo those as we go through. James.
Hi, so I'm James, software developer on this project. So far in this project, we've sort of we've kind of skirted over 2 issues around before this sprint. Development only had 1 planning application, and we were kind of skirting over multi-phase developments, whereas in this sprint, we really sort of got our teeth into that idea. So that's the multi-phase side of things. So we spoke with Mike Glass about how multi-phase development stuff works. Went through that with a really helpful session of just kind of going like, well, how does this work, and how does this work over multiple years, and a development sort of being approved in different stages, and the overarching planning application and how each one works from there. And then we spent quite an intense session of just sort of thinking about how do we best model this within our system, about having what a development is, and how it has multiple planning applications, and how it can be part of a larger scheme. So I might sit down. If I can have someone hold this. So this is the system. You can ask us for a login at any time. One big thing here is that we've now imported 4 real developments into it, 2 from the Elephant Park and 2 other ones that were brought in. So if I was to choose this one, which is it's got 61 dwellings on this one, I'm going to talk about the feature that we've developed, which is having multiple planning applications to a development. So say that this one has been agreed, and theoretically they come back and say, we want to make an amendment to this. That would come in a new planning application, so we can associate a new planning application to that. So if we go back to this development, we can see that development still has this key planning application, but we can associate other ones to it. And if we were to go back to this, we can now search for that new planning application that we put in, which is 19 AP, and it will pop up, the key part. And then say, because it's been agreed and we now have these new additions, we'd want to reflect those. So if we were to manage development and say that actually one of the things that was agreed in that agreement was that this dwelling is now going to become a studio, which is a new thing that we're also capturing in this system, is whether something is a studio or not. We could say the reason it was. I don't know what the reason would be, but there would be one. And we can also say that it was associated with this planning application, so we can then connect that. And if we go back to the development, We can see the changes that have happened. We can see that change was logged here. We've got the reason, the free text reason for why it was there, but also the legal agreement that was there, that was made in. So in the future we could link that through to the actual PDF so that people could see where those were made. And I think that is everything on that. So they said there was two sides of that. There was the having multiple planning applications and grouping them into schemes. We have a really good idea. We have a really good idea now about how we're going to group them into schemes and how that process works. We haven't built that yet, but that's what we're going to be doing in the next and final sprint.
So hi, I'm Daria, I'm the service designer. One of the things we were proud of this sprint was that we clarified and polished the process by which developments move between statuses. So we'd already had this idea of developments being entered in a draft format, and then when the Section 106 and planning application is agreed, it can be moved to an agreed status, and then it could be changed to a started status when the development is implemented. However, what we hadn't really thought through with enough depth was the actual triggers that would instigate these process changes. So now what we have is a really clear view of what those triggers would be, and we have also made clearer definitions for each of these statuses. So we've got a really clear idea of what those statuses look like. And our next steps on this will be to add these labels of these definitions to the actual prototype, so that when people are entering the statuses, they can check exactly what that means. So we'll be testing this with our users. And we'll also be adding the functionality in the next sprint to capture the date of the status change. So as something moves into agreed, for example, even if you're entering that change today, but it actually happened a month ago, you will then be able to capture the date at which that status was actually changed in reality.
Hi, I'm Adam, the researcher on the project. One of the things that we've done this sprint was to have a meeting with Peabody to understand how we might be able to integrate their data and then the data from other registered providers into the tool. This could be for validation of the data that we start out with, that we receive from developers, but also going forward about how we might then be able to audit the historical and existing stock. So from Peabody, we obtained a provisional list of 10 years. It's not too much of a surprise that in their system they use different terminology to what Southwark might use within their broad policy, and also it started to reveal that lots of different providers use lots of different terminology. We had a great conversation around the regulator, the terminology that the regulator use, which is then reflected in, for example, the reporting that Rob produces, some of the reporting that Rob produces. So we know that there's opportunities for crossover. It just needs to be reviewed at how that's going to work. We also then started to look at how we can use the registered provider, in this case Peabody, to validate the information that we would receive from a developer upon completion of a development. So we've worked around how this could work sort of theoretically with regards a form that they could then sense check what a developer has provided Southwark in terms of this is who the RP is. A simple check by the RP then gives us a bit of a closed loop. It means that we've got the sort of maximum level of data integrity that we can get. One of the other things that was thrown up was Peabody's use of the term UPRN, which meant something very different to what UPRN means in Southwark and indeed in all other local authorities. They were using it literally as a unique reference number, unique property reference number, but that has different connotations for Southwark. Notwithstanding, it did mean that they do have unique numbers for the units and addresses that they have. This really allows us to do some better data matching across what information we have and what they have, but also it gives us an element of data security when we're transmitting this data, because it produces it to an anonymized level, so it might not be listing the actual address, but we'll be able to match the two pieces of data up. So the next thing that we're going to be doing in this sprint is to build out the form so we can test this with Peabody of them validating some information from a development, and also allow them to input their unit identifiers, which means we can have better data communication between the two organisations. The next thing that we did was to look at the data that is currently required for LDD reporting needs. So this is the completion reporting that Haj does. Hi Haj, thank you for your time spent with us. So it's very clear that this is a time-consuming and difficult process, and perhaps could be made easier. And through the conversations with Haj and I don't know if Kira, there you are, sorry, I couldn't see because of that. We were able to sort of work out that with some additions to the service that we're building, in particular some different data capture fields, that we'd be able to produce this data then in a much more accessible format for this team to complete that work, compared with having the current process of having to go through all of the PDFs on the planning portal, etc., etc. So this really was around, one of the fields was Studio, which you saw James demonstrate a little bit earlier. And the next thing that we just need to clarify a little bit further is the wheelchair units. And we'll hopefully get that tidied up this week. And once we've got that confirmed, that will then get pushed into the development cycle, so that can then get added in. Oh yeah, sorry. Oh yeah, and the last thing then was looking at the supplementary planning documents. There's some opportunities for recommendation around the information within the SPDs that would allow us to improve this early data that's submitted from developers, so that we've got the information in a more consistent format up front, which is being used by lots of different people through Southwark. But with the fact that the information is provided in quite different forms, that's one of the sort of blockers, if you like, one of the complications when we're trying to use this information for one purpose or another.
Thanks. So another big achievement this sprint was that we held an all-day workshop on Friday where we kind of lifted ourselves out of the weeds of the service and the tool, and aligned as a team on our service mission and looked at possible futures for this service. So where could it go from building the real thing that we've done now, and identified a bunch of opportunities and risks around that. The next step for that is for all of those learnings, findings, alignment to form plan or plans for the next phases of development and support. So what happens next and what we think should happen next. We also met with Rob to confirm our approach with the council's housing team. This has meant we've begun to explore the existing data held in the council around the council's own housing stock. Next slide. We are planning to treat the council really like any other registered provider. So what we want to do next is to test the processes for getting information from registered providers with the council's own housing team. Gaz.
Thanks, Alex. Hey everyone, I'm Gaz. I'm working as a designer on the project. This sprint we started to do something that we've been threatening to do for the last couple of sprints, and that was look at how we surface and visualise some of the data that we're gathering. We started that by doing some collaborative wireframes for the development dashboards. You can see we started to think about how some data visualisations might sit with on this page. We started to get concerned that things were getting a little bit cluttered, so as a byproduct of this, we started to think about how we could simplify this dashboard page slightly. That meant that we did some collaborative wireframes around organising this information. We started to think about how we could actually break this interface up into more digestible chunks, which led us to Can you drive? And I can point. So if we click through to one of our developments now, you can see that we've broken that whole page up into 3 tabs. When you click through to the statistics, we have this table, which links back to something that we spoke about.
To the LDD.
To the
So the form that the LDD information kind of needs to come in a particular way. And thanks to Haj and Kira, we saw that the most helpful way for that information to be presented is in this sort of tabular format. So we've kind of recreated that within the system using the data that we're already capturing.
We've also added a few charts here. The first one being number of habitable rooms organised by tenure. You can see that when you hover over these, you get the details. Second chart is number of units divided up by tenure. And then we've added a very simple pie chart which just simply shows the percentage of affordable habitable rooms across the entire development. And another tab with the changes to legal agreement. And our next step is to test that whole service end to end with some real users.
Thanks, guys. So, testing the end-to-end service with real users is our big aim for the next sprint. This means taking some real developments that have at various stages of development, whether they've been agreed, started, completed, and running through the process and the tool with each of the actors that would be involved in each part of the process. So really rounding it off and making sure that the thing works from end to end, which is it's real software with real data in it. To do that, we need to create and test the registered provider return form so that we can test that with them. We'll also be creating a kind of final project report with recommendations for next steps and updating the business case that we produced in Discovery with things that we've learnt since. That's it for today. Thank you.